Hello, everyone. This is Holly's Pandorium. I'm your host, Holly Jordan. And today with me, we have a guest by the name of Oliver Baer. Hello, Oliver.
Hello.
He's got some fun things to share with us, and I'm excited. I just met him recently, so this stuff that he's going to share is going to be new to me as well as you. And just a heads up, Oliver, we have guests that will be watching us and listening. So for the listeners, please be sure to explain things that you may normally just say in general to help them follow along with us. So Oliver, tell me, what was an incident with the paranormal that affected you in your life, and when was it and what happened?
So this was more. I like for me. I think I've probably had several experiences, but this particular one was about. Let's see, it's 2024. So now I have to do math.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
About 20 years ago, maybe
Okay.
between 20 and 25 years ago, let's say.
Okay.
And I was at I had a social work job then, working with people with a broad spectrum of people, with people who had psychiatric disabilities,
Okay.
people living with AIDS, people who were homeless.
Okay.
And we housed them. So basically, I was working in a building where we were providing housing for this range of people.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
so social service. Yeah.
Right. It was SRO housing. So
Okay.
in the agency I worked for, there were different levels of housing, and this was supposedly the most independent. So people came in and in their intake interview kind of proved to us that they could basically live on their own and pay rent.
Okay.
So that they had, and we were there basically to provide support. But the building itself was one of the first immigrant hospitals in New York City.
Oh, wow.
And it was built. I'm not sure. I don't know if it was originally built this way, but it was a tuberculosis hospital.
Oh.
Tuberculosis being one of the main diseases that people at the time. So it was built in the late 19th century.
Right.
Tuberculosis was a big disease. And New York City, for those people who don't really know the city, then most of the people came in through the south of the island, through what is now a Battery Park, or where the Statue of Liberty ferry leaves from. So
okay.
So basically the south of the island, and then they basically lived in that area. So basically most of Manhattan was farmland for half of the island, and then the lower part of Manhattan was where basically everybody else lived, and it was a very, very densely populated area.
Okay.
So not surprisingly, tuberculosis was a disease that many people got.
Right, of course.
And one of the weird things about medical knowledge at the time was so the specific tuberculosis rooms in this building had basically weren't completely round. They were basically had a rounded side, with an outdoor balcony.
Okay.
And the reason that it was rounded was because they believed that tuberculosis, the bacteria, the germ couldn't live in corners. So they created these rounded rooms. Now, to us now, that sounds ridiculous.
But at the time, it made sense, apparently.
At the time, that was their idea.
Sure.
Um, so there were several rooms in this building with these rounded rooms. And it being an old building, and um, we had one particular person who would come down. All the offices, so where I worked, were in the basement of this building.
Okay.
The other weirdness was that our dining room and kitchen were actually the morgue of the hospital originally.
Oh, good Lord.
Um, and I mentioned there were people who lived in the building with psychiatric disabilities.
Correct.
So one could say you sort of have a recipe
Yes.
for
Wow.
paranormal experiences.
Uh-huh. Sounds that way.
But one of the particular experience I'm going to describe is that we had one guy who came regularly and complained of hearing noises in the room above him, and that it was really disturbing to him.
Okay.
And so, and some of those noises could be explained when somebody was living in the room.
Sure.
But it became harder to explain when he heard them and there was nobody in the room.
Okay.
So my his case manager and then my boss both encouraged him to basically submit a report of what he heard.
Okay.
And so if not every day, at least once a week, he would come down with his report.
Okay.
And finally, my boss sort of, had tried everything to explain the noises to him.
Sure.
Including getting like the super and a contractor up there to see if it was like, old pipes or wind going past the windows.
Right.
Because we were not that far from the East River. So
Okay.
it could be windy.
Sure.
And so finally, when my boss had, felt like he had done everything, I come in one day for work, and he says to me, Oliver, I want you to get done what you need to get done in the morning because I have a job for you this afternoon. And I was like, okay.
Pretty vague.
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
A lot of times not really like him to be vague.
Right.
Sometimes he did it. I mean, we were of like mind, so sometimes he did it just to amuse
Of course.
himself or me.
Right.
So I said, okay, so what am I doing this afternoon? He said, well, this afternoon, you're going to go up to the room that we've been getting all these complaints about. Nobody was living in it at the time.
Okay.
And you're going to spend the afternoon in that room and see what you see and hear what you hear, and then come back and tell me what you experienced.
Okay.
And I said, all right. And I'm thinking like, well, I guess this beats, the rest of the whole day at work.
Right.
I said, do you want me to stay there all evening? Because I was supposed to, we served one meal to our people, and it was dinner, and it was my job. We charged a minimal amount of money for dinner.
Right.
So it was my job to collect the money.
Okay.
So I said, well, I'm supposed to collect money for dinner. So if you want me to stay there all evening, somebody else is going to collect money. He's like, I don't think it'll take that long, but if it does, I'll take care of it. So I go up to the room, and I'm sitting around and, like hour goes by and there's really nothing happening. 2 hours go by. Like like I hear the wind outside the window. I think it's very obviously the wind.
Mm-hmm.
There is a tapping, but it's again in the area of the pipes.
Sure.
So, and it's near the ceiling, and this room was near the roof.
So that makes
So,
sense. Yeah.
you know, I should also say I just realized. Well, I guess I'll say this after we talk about this,
Okay.
but uh, but basically, so you know, I'm there. I'm gonna say 4 hours, and
Mm-hmm.
basically, there's not much happening.
Okay.
Um, and then on a whim, it's getting to the time that I'm supposed to go to dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and um, basically, I just because I can be a smart ass. I just say to the air in the room, "Well, I'm gonna have to leave soon. So if there's anybody here or anything, you know, you're gonna be alone and you missed your chance."
Okay. All right.
Um, you know, and like within, I think, like 15 minutes or so, the temperature of the room dropped a little. I mean, not
Okay.
amazingly. And I'm like turning around, and I only thought about that afterwards because I
Sure.
started moving towards the door,
Mm-hmm.
and the blinds on the window shade of the room started rattling.
Weird.
Yeah. And I was like, huh. So I just decide again, because I am, you know, that kind of thing, that kind of mentality. I
Mm-hmm.
decide, well, I might as well have a conversation
Okay.
because, or to see if maybe that was just wind coming through like a crack in the window or
Right.
something. I'm like, so you're upset that I'm going to leave? I would think that would be fine because you have the whole room to yourself and you were quiet for like these last several hours. So I was guessing you didn't want anybody around. And then there's really just um there's just basically like another rattling.
Okay.
And there's kind of a slight breeze
Okay.
inside that
All right.
wasn't there before.
Okay.
Um, and I basically say, like, well, um, I guess that means you'd like me to stay around. Um, and then there's a breeze and something there's there's a there seems to be like I can sense some kind of presence in the room,
Okay.
but, um but that's mostly where I all like what I got. And then I said, well, I'm sorry, but I have to go because I have a job to do downstairs. But usually, like there's somebody who lives below. There's an actual corporeal human being. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I said that word, that lives below, and you're kind of disturbing that person. So if you could keep your your life, your um, business to a minimum, that would be really appreciated. And again, there's like a rattling of the shades.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I hear what you're saying, but I just thought I'd let you know that,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to go. And I left, and went downstairs to my boss, and he said, so? And I said, well, you know, nothing that I can really put a finger on, but I think most of what happened was basically, could be explained by noisy pipes
Right.
or possibly a crack in the window or
Right.
something like that. And it was like, okay, well, I'll let the person know, but I'll also let them know that you basically looked into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right after that, from then on, many of the people said, not my coworkers, many of my people said that like that guy still complained of noise, but
Mm-hmm.
the noise was less.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
and many of the other people said that when they came down to talk to me, that sometimes they felt a breeze or thought that something was listening to us.
Interesting. Wow.
Now,
So, I'm curious. Let me ask you a quick question. So, back in this room that you were in,
right,
you said that it could have been air or wind blowing by the windows,
right,
but
yeah,
what type of heating system did it have? Was it ceiling heat? Was it baseboard heat, or
I right,
what was it?
yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it was. I want to say. I don't think it was baseboard. I think it was like pipes, heat that came up in
Oh,
the.
so a radiator type of heater?
Maybe
So
it was
not
a
forced
radiator
air.
type. It could. Well, I was thinking it was forced air, which is
Okay.
the pipes. I
Okay.
don't remember a radiator in there, so
Okay.
it could have been a combination of baseboard
Okay.
and
Right.
so yeah, so part of my idea with this was I while I have had experience and I have a belief in paranormal stuff. Um, I was raised by two doctors, and I had a very scientific education.
Okay.
So so my so while I but over time, because of many of my experiences and other studies that I
Influences.
right
Okay.
influences and studies that I've done on my own, I I basically like I believe, but so I guess I tend to my mind automatically goes for the more I guess what I think of like scientific or logical
Sure.
explanation of things,
Okay.
but I allow for the possibility that um that these things have a non scientific or rational explanation, mystical explanation, spiritual explanation, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Um, so that's why even in telling the story, like when people were saying that, and because I have that, I also have a sort of morbid sense of humor. So
Okay.
even though it was my job to talk to people with psychiatric problems, sometimes
Right.
I got not morose, a morbid joy. My morbid sense of humor came out, and I
Sure.
was like, yes, I am, like some people started calling me the ghost whisperer.
Okay.
Because when these things would happen when I was talking to them, I'd like look up and say, "I'm busy right now. Can we talk about this later?
That's
Can
awesome.
you leave?" Or like, "You're disturbing them.
Right.
They don't understand."
Right.
And so yeah, I got the reputation of being the weird person on staff
Gotcha.
and the ghost whisperer. Um, but again, I kept trying to explain it, and my boss definitely was not on the mystical or believing in the ghost line of thought. He
Right.
was basically much more on, like you said, it could be the heating system, and he was at a loss because he had the super and contractors check out the heating system.
Right.
But really old buildings, it's hard to basically pinpoint a lot of
Right.
that stuff.
Sure. Sure.
Um, it also being near the roof, it could have been like it being an old building, there could have been not been proper insulation between the roof
Yes.
and the room itself, which could cause weird noises to happen.
Of
Um,
course.
the building could be shifting. Uh, you know, old house type stuff.
Right.
But so yeah, so basically my logic end of things was to sort of explain it away with that idea of, well, you know, so far nothing really negative has happened,
Good.
but like, and I'm amused that I'm, unfortunate. You could say, unfortunately, I probably shouldn't have been as amused about the
Okay.
reactions of the people I was supposed to be taking care of.
Right.
Um, I did listen to them. And
Okay.
when I left that job, one of the things I was told, um, I did end up seeing when I left that job, some people, because one of the things we learned about homeless people is even when you give them housing, some homeless people just don't know how to deal with actually having a space of their own.
Okay.
So they basically will, like, you give them a space of their own, and perhaps they can even pay rent and stuff like that. But they still go out and will, like, go to the corner that they always used to stand on, and still sometimes believe that they have to ask for money, or they go out and start collecting stuff from the street to
Right.
put in their space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when I left the job, I would see some of the people on the street.
Sure.
And they would tell me, it's that they greatly missed me and that it wasn't the same with me gone, because they felt like nobody listened to them like I did, which I guess surprised me with, like, the way I tell that story is
Right.
like I felt like I wasn't doing justice to their concerns, and yet apparently I was the staff member they thought did the most for them.
That's great. That's great. Well, it sounds like you have a healthy um, amount of, you know, reasonable doubt, but that you're still open minded. Because most people in your situation would not have tried talking to an entity or spirit when they're trying to listen for noise. That would not even come up. And so the
Right,
fact
right.
that you took the initiative to try and make a contact just in case there was something there that could hear you, I think that was very good spirited of you to do that. And it sounds like it was effective. I work as a
Uh, I,
medium and
I
I
like
found that,
your pun. I like your
yeah,
pun. Good spirited.
right. Um, a lot of times spirits show up because they have something they want to say, or they just want to be acknowledged. And you did that. You spoke to them like they were still alive, and that makes a huge difference to people in the afterlife, because they're still people, they just don't have a body. So
Yeah.
that was great. So you did very well done, Oliver. That was very good.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, I mean, that's what I figured. I mean, to me, the point was proven when when whatever, either whatever it was, or maybe there were, since the building that we were in, as I said, was an old hospital,
right.
and the offices were near the morgue. It could have
Sure.
been more than it could have been more than one. I have no idea.
Correct. You're
It
right.
could
And
it could
that's
have been the
entirely
it
possible.
could have been the same entity that traveled
Right.
from that top floor area to the,
Right.
because I was the only one. Like, I guess the question in my head was, if it's really lonely, or it feels like it's not being recognized,
Hmm.
like, I guess it didn't see the people with psychiatric problems who were reacting to it
Right.
as recognition.
Right.
Or maybe it wasn't the right recognition. Maybe it,
Right.
like, again, like you said, if they're really still people, maybe it was too much like their experience when they were alive in that hospital. And
Sure.
so that wasn't a recognition. They didn't want to look in a mirror,
Right.
so to speak.
Right.
Um, so maybe that's the thing.
Maybe.
Um,
Yeah. Could be. Could be. So after that experience, have you had any other encounters similar to that in other situations, or was this a one-time thing?
that was pretty much a one-time thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I live over. So years ago, it's not this anymore, but I live over a space that was a bar when I first moved in,
Hmm.
and it closed. I want to say again, 10 years ago. Um, but when it was a bar, there was this idea that it was one of that it was haunted.
Okay.
Um, and I personally, well, at that time, I don't remember really having like an experience like the one I had that I just described there.
Hmm.
There was one point where I thought I saw some kind of presence, but um, but again, like, the window was open, um, and it was like a dive bar, so light wasn't really like a big thing. Dive bars tend to be a little bit more shadowy and
Sure.
not big, to have dull bulbs and things like
Right.
that. So it was much more shadows by a pool table, I think, is how I thought of it. I think somebody else thought there was something there,
Right.
um, and then let me know. So the other thing I think of in terms of that was, well, perhaps I was just influenced by somebody telling me
Sure.
there was something there.
Because that's possible. That's
Right.
entirely possible. Yeah.
So, like, and that was before, I believe that experience was before the social work job. So, like, to me, I don't chalk that up as necessarily the same thing.
Hmm.
And then after that, I don't really think I've had anything similar. I think that was basically it. And I think most of the other paranormal stuff may have happened. The other experiences I'm thinking of happened way before those.
Okay.
So I don't. I don't believe that I've really had much after that, though. Well, again, like this other particular experience, I can't remember if it was after the social work
Okay.
job or if it was during the social work job. But um, I think of myself as a pagan,
Okay.
uh, and I had a friend of mine who owned basically like a juice stand, a juice and
Okay.
um, like uh, coffee, tea, that kind of stand. And I used to go to her place for in the morning. For one time, she was telling me about problems with her boyfriend, and she and how she was having a lot of issues with him.
Okay.
And I had meant she knew that I was a pagan, but she kept referring to me as a witch.
Okay. All right.
Again, again, and you know, and she wasn't really. She said she knew pagans, but that she thought of me much more as what people think of who the people outside the pagan
Sure.
community
Okay.
think of
Okay.
witches. And again, you know, my sense of humor and things, I decided not to disavow her
Okay.
of that thought.
Sure. Okay.
So I said, well, you know, there are other options. You know, if you want, I can take care of your boyfriend. And she looked at me and she was like, you would do that? I'd say, well, if it's what you really want, you know, I would do that for you. And she said, well, you know, I am thinking of, you know, breaking off the relationship. I mean, it's really causing me problems. But maybe if you could do something that would cause him to break it off, or do something to show him, you know, not to mess with me. And I said, are you sure this is what you want? She's like, well, maybe not. You know, I don't dislike him that much. Nah, but maybe.
Wow.
And I was like, uh, well, if that's what you want, you know, I said, you know, you should be careful what you wish for.
Correct. Very true statement.
And um, and she said, well, you know, I understand, but I'm having a really hard time. So maybe, and I was like, okay. And and I, you know, I did some energy work, but it wasn't the energy work I did was not negative.
Okay.
Um, at least I didn't see it as negative.
Okay.
Let's get it that way.
Okay.
Um, so, and then she came back to me. I don't know, it was a week later or so.
Hmm.
She said, like, what did you do? I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything.
Hmm.
Because you said maybe, so I didn't do anything. She's like, you did something because he was really sick.
Uh-oh.
He was really sick. Like, I thought we had to go to the hospital sick.
Okay.
So you did something. And I said, well, you know, I said, actually, you know, really, I didn't. I said, I did some energy work, but it was mostly for me.
Okay.
I wasn't doing anything intentional. She was like, no, 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 you did something. It's like, I got to watch out for you because you did something.
Okay.
So from then on, she really believed that I could do things to people,
Oh,
and
wow.
she would tell people that to be careful of me because, um, and then she would tell her story of the boyfriend.
Okay.
Um, so which I I just took it as like, well, this is going to work for me. Um, on some level, I did think, I have to admit, I did think, well, it didn't work completely for me because you're not in a relationship with me. Not that and I didn't, I wasn't doing any
Right.
love spell, working
Okay.
on that kind of energy. I wasn't doing that.
So did
But
she stay in the relationship, Oliver, or did she get out of
well,
it?
she eventually dumped that guy,
Okay.
but again, not right away.
Okay.
Um, she had her own issues, so again, um, things that could be an explanation was she liked to drink.
Okay.
She liked, um, and I believe there were some drugs involved. So, was her boyfriend getting sick a result of both of them not taking care of themselves?
Right.
Was it a result of, you know, I've been out all night partying
Right.
and not getting enough sleep?
Sure.
And, was it a result of that?
Right.
Again, possibility. Um,
Okay.
um,
So
so,
beyond that, do you have other paranormal experiences that you feel were notable for you or that influenced you in some way?
yes, they all happened earlier in my life. Um, one particular experience. So, one of the things that is notable about me, um, which perhaps this explains um, the entities being friendly towards me,
Okay.
is is that I'm a modern medical miracle.
Okay.
I I should not
Explain.
be I should not be talking to you right now.
Okay.
Um,
Why is that?
I am one of the very, very few people who has gone an extremely long time with one kidney transplant.
Okay.
So in August, it'll be 46 years.
Wow.
So I had the transplant um, basically when I was a teenager,
Wow.
um, a
If you had
early
it at
teenager.
that must have been extreme to have a transplant as a teenager.
Yes, and it was in the first decade of transplantation. So medicine was very different or the process of having a transplant
Absolutely.
was was different.
Right.
Not extremely different, but like basically very different.
Right.
So I was very sick and dying when I was a tween,
Sure.
as they would say in today's language, a tween.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I don't believe we had that word
You're correct. We did not.
46. You
We did
know,
not.
uh,
You're
yeah, I
right.
don't know. I didn't want to guess your age, so
Oh, no, it's
I was
fine. I'm
questioning.
60. You're
Okay, so
yeah.
yes, so yeah,
Okay.
you get it. We didn't have that word
Correct.
then.
We did not.
Uh, so yeah, so when I was a tween, I was really sick, um, and dying. Um, and I remember this event that happened to me, which was I shared a room with my brother, and my bed was the one that was basically um, closest to the wall.
Okay.
So I had more of a direct line of sight out our door.
Okay.
And um, outdoor door, you could see the stairs that went downstairs.
Okay.
And so this was at night, and I don't remember if I was just going to sleep or I wasn't feeling great, so I was having problems sleeping.
Okay.
But I remember it being dark and looking out towards the landing of the stairs.
Okay.
And as I was looking out there, I saw a shape kind of form itself out of the darkness.
Oh boy.
And it kind of started creating like a human shape.
Okay.
Um, and I was a little, I was starting to get rather anxious and,
Sure.
not, and thinking I must be seeing things or,
Sure. Sure.
like,
Hallucinating
uh,
or something.
or something, or like, am I really, um, that sick?
Right.
And then like as I looked more, like markings sort of started showing up on for what we're gonna call the body.
Okay.
Um,
So markings on you or markings on what you
no,
saw?
on what I saw.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and 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 I think it was, if I remember correctly, it did a kind of beckoning thing.
Okay.
Um, and then I think that was, and I think then that was kind of it. I mean, I was I was petrified. I was
So
scared.
when you say beckoning, let's back up for a second. When
Yeah.
you say a beckoning thing,
Mhm.
so did you get the impression that it was motioning to you to come towards it, to follow it?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was most like wanted me to follow it or if it was like asking me to come to it or if it was basically like, you know, trying to point to something. It looked like it was doing this, but
Okay,
I
so
wasn't.
for
But
listeners, what
again,
he's talking about making a hand motion left to right, drawing something towards you,
yeah,
which to
thank
me
you
it
for
sounds
that.
like it wants you to come to you. But
Right,
now, did this
but
happen
the
one time
shape
or
one
it
time,
happened?
yeah,
Okay,
one time,
okay,
but the shape was vague. So,
okay,
like to me, with the motion of the hand
okay.
coming towards the body again, as I
Hmm.
said, the shape was vaguely humanoid.
Okay,
But I felt like it was vague enough that it was sort of a shifting, let's call it a shifting blackness.
okay,
Like
gotcha.
the darkness was sort of shifting, like it wasn't a
Okay, sure,
clear outline.
right,
So again, I guess I wasn't sure whether the hand was beckoning or whether it was pointing because I
gotcha,
couldn't see that distinctly.
right, okay,
Um, and then I think that, and then I in my head, I think that was it. I think I like closed my eyes and basically was like, all right, just go to sleep. You're seeing things,
right,
like this isn't real.
right.
The way that affected me was that uh, 20 something years later, um, I meet a man who has become my martial, who I go to this man's school of martial arts. So
Okay,
it's a martial arts school.
okay,
Um, and he also happens to be, besides being a great teacher of traditional martial arts, traditional Chinese internal martial arts.
Okay.
and meditation and qigong and stuff like that. He also happened to be before, sort of before, or he also had his own journey in studying mysticism,
Okay.
which included being part of the OTO. If you know what the OTO
I
is.
don't. I don't. Please
Oh,
tell
okay.
me.
The OTO is the lodge, or chapter group of people that follow the practice of Aleister Crowley.
Ah, okay.
OTO stands for Order Templar Ordinaris,
Okay.
Ordo Templar Ordinaris, which is
Gotcha.
basically what. So yeah, there, for people who know about Crowley and the history,
Right.
um, there was this is sort of what became of his uh, group
Okay.
after he passed away.
Okay.
It kind of merged a little with the Golden Dawn.
Right.
So for anybody who knows the history of the magic with the K,
Right.
um, but particularly the Crowleyan school, that's they would probably know about that. So
Okay.
so my teacher was um, not unused to. He had his own mystical experiences
Sure.
in
Sounds like it. Yeah.
various, um, but the weird, and then we kind of like from the moment I started, taking classes with him, it became rapidly apparent that, again, like my boss, we were very much of the same mind.
Okay.
So much so that sometimes it really seemed like we knew what each other was thinking before. Um, so that sometimes we didn't have to talk. I don't
Right.
chalk that up to a paranormal experience.
Okay.
Um, I think mainly because that has happened to me with other people,
Sure.
where
Sure.
they actually say, "What are you doing in my head?"
Right.
Um, and again, because of my sensibilities, I don't tell them that it's not true.
Right.
Um, but the weird thing about this man who's my teacher is that the clarity of that dark shape on the stairway when I did get some kind of clear
Hmm.
picture
Right.
kind of looked like my teacher.
Okay. Interesting.
But like I didn't know anything about him
Right.
at that point.
Sure.
Um so I guess on some level, and I talked to him about that experience.
Okay.
And he said, well, that just shows that, you were meant to be here.
Okay.
You were meant to study with me. Now,
Okay.
again, was he saying that because because I'm paying him for classes and he wants me to
Right.
studying
Right.
with him? You know, um, I have kept studying with him, so I've been with him now for 30 over 30 years.
Hmm.
Um,
But your healthy
so,
skepticism is warranted. I believe that for anybody interested in the paranormal, we have to remain objective, and the only
right,
way to do that is have some healthy skepticism about everything we see,
right,
because it's hard to know what is real and what is not, and
right,
it's it's kind of a fine line between some of it. But I appreciate you quantifying that and explaining it in that way, that he's telling you these things, but you're not just swallowing it because you have respect for the man. You realize that there may be another reason why he's saying that. So that's
right.
I appreciate you saying it that way.
Yeah. I mean, and since then, like, well, I guess, again, the interesting thing is as we're talking,
Hmm.
I realized there have been other experiences which perhaps could be thought of as paranormal, but I didn't think of them that way.
Sure.
Was that because of his interest and mine? My interest turns out coincide with a lot of his interests. Um, he is because of his interest in mysticism. We've started over the years. We started looking into the sort of ritualistic aspect and the magic with a K aspect of Taoism, because that's
Okay.
at the heart of the martial arts that we do.
Okay.
Or it's at the heart of one particular martial art that we do. I should
Correct.
say we do at least three different systems, three different
Okay.
types of martial arts. So one
Okay.
particular one has as its basis some of this ritualistic stuff. So
Okay.
we've looked into it, and we've actually worked on, with his knowledge, he's actually done more reading up and studying on it, and then taught it to a select few of us at the school. And so we've actually done some rituals in
Okay.
regard to that. And we've gotten some, let's say, responses, I guess would be the
Okay.
right word.
Okay.
Um, and we've gone along with those responses. Now, again, were those responses things that we already wanted to hear and were kind of
Right.
in our head, or did we actually make contact with like an ancestral? In Chinese there are gods, but there's also ancestral um lines. So it's
Sure.
sort of like talking to ghosts, but
Right.
it's the ancestor worship idea.
Gotcha. Okay.
So like one of the things we've done a couple of times is try to contact somebody in our who's in our lineage. So
Okay.
there's a lineage for the school,
Okay.
um, and that and that lineage ancestor is no longer alive. So
Okay.
there's a ritual for that. The most recent one we did was to try to contact one of the gods, the god of martial arts and business, and it seems like we got some answer.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
there was there was a thing which, as somebody remarked, could have been part of the answer, which was there was a breeze that went over the there's a particular pattern you lay out on the ground,
Okay.
and then you walk the pattern and do certain hand sigils and things.
Okay.
Um, and you say words. So it's basically a ritual.
Okay. That's
Um,
fair.
Um, and so after we all did this, we all sat down and basically meditated and focused our mind on, what we had just done.
Right.
There was a breeze that went over the candles on the ground that somebody noticed that wasn't there before. But again,
Okay.
was that just a weather thing,
Right.
or was that part of the, you know, I think nobody else really commented on it, and my
Right.
teacher didn't comment on it. We were more going with like, you know, we're more focusing on is there an answer that we are receiving? Um,
Okay.
and we all so the way we decided on that was after our meditation portion of this, we all then said like the things that came to us, and they
Okay.
all seem to be relatively the same thing and have similar, not the same, but the similar images. So we all decided that we had received an answer. Um, again,
That's great.
again, was that really from the God? Um, I'm gonna say yes
Okay.
because you know I like because again, like you said, I have a healthy skepticism, but in doing these things, I tend towards the belief that it was, even though I guess again I'm willing to go with the fact that perhaps it was all what we wanted.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
so that was so you know again was that paranormal? Like I tend to think that it was no more paranormal than people going to church, praying
Okay.
to Jesus, and then getting an answer that they believe
Okay.
Jesus told them.
Okay.
Um, so I guess I chalk it up to belief more than and faith more than
Another
paranormal.
form of spiritualism, perhaps.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I chalk it up to
Okay.
spiritualism more than
Okay.
so I think I've had things like that happen that I didn't consider paranormal. I did realize that the other effect, which I didn't mention, was that talking to the ghosts event, that effect, the effect that had on me was I ended up writing a story that was based on that event.
Okay. So
Um,
that's the other part of how I actually met you is to do with what you do now, which is work as a writer. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Okay.
I make more money doing freelance copy editing and proofreading than I do as
Okay.
a writer.
Okay.
Um,
That's fair.
so but yes, I guess the answer is yes.
Okay. So tell us about your book. Tell us about how you describe this experience and what happens.
So basically, the um, the story I wrote that's based on the experience is actually a short story and not a
Okay.
book.
Okay.
Um, and it's in an anthology of ghost stories
Okay.
called Even in the Grave.
Okay.
Um, and so my story, I happen to be a big fan, and I'm inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. For
Okay.
anybody, for you or anybody listening out there who's not familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, uh, he was a late 19th, or basically an early 20th century uh, pulp writer
Yes.
who mostly wrote what are now called very weird stories.
Correct. My
With
husband is a big fan, so I know a little bit about him, but
okay,
yeah,
all
yeah,
right, yeah.
and there was a I don't remember if it was HBO, but one of the bigger networks had a short series. I think it was last year or the year before with Lovecraft stories that were redone, and
Um,
that's the only other
I don't know.
exposure I have with it.
Yeah, I don't remember them being all Lovecraft stories. I think it was Showtime did like a horror series where they had two Lovecraft stories, and one was Dreams in the Witch House.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I could go on about that, but like one of my
Okay.
issues, well, one of my issues, which your husband may have a similar issue,
Okay.
is that there are very, very few good film adaptations of Lovecraft stories.
That I can believe. Yeah,
Most
that
of
makes
them
sense.
really have almost nothing to do with the story, or mix the story with various other elements that weren't even in there.
Right.
Um, but I think the one that was the movie recently, which Nicolas Cage was in, Color Out of Space, that was actually
Okay.
pretty good.
Was it?
Um,
Okay.
um, but anyway, so I love that weirdness. Much of what I write has a sort of Lovecraftian element to it.
Okay.
Um, so I wrote a weird. So basically, I took that incident at the social work job and I created a weird ghost story
Okay.
out of it.
Gotcha.
Um, and it's, but I have to say, for those who know, um, this is a weird ghost story without a weird Lovecraftian story without tentacles. So there are
Okay.
no
Gotcha.
tentacles in it,
Okay.
really. But there is weirdness and surreality, and it is inspired by um, by that incident. It was also somewhat inspired by the movie The Others, if you ever saw that movie.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
That's one of my favorite movies.
yeah, and it's
It's a great
also there's
movie.
a little. Yeah, it is a great movie, and there's also a little bit. I would say probably more my experience than this. There's a little bit of Shutter Island in there too.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So,
Um,
is this something that you've done as a series, or you just what else have you written
uh,
another set of ghost
so
stories, or
right, so basically that was mainly the weird ghost story that was inspired by that. But the basis of that story,
hmm
besides the experience, was actually some years ago. Actually, when I was in college, I wrote
okay,
a I wrote I wrote a multimedia play before multimedia plays were a thing.
okay,
About a guy. Again, this was before I had the social work job, but I was getting a psych degree. Um,
okay,
so it was about a guy who goes to a psychiatrist and doesn't get better.
okay,
Um, and so for years I worked on that play. I had it workshopped here in New York. Um, and the basic feedback I got was it went no further than that because um, because basically the response I got was, "You have way too many characters. This is too expensive. Nobody will do this play." So I basically put it to the side and
okay,
didn't do much. And then and like looked at it sporadically, worked on it a little, but really nothing much. And then 2020, I decided 2020 or 20 end of 2019. I think it was 2020 when everything crazy was happening. I
right,
decided, well, I want to do something with this, but what if I reformatted this play into a story?
okay,
And so I made a novella out of that play.
okay,
And one of my ideas for the novella is that each act of the play would be its own story and it would come together as a novella.
okay,
And so when I was writing the ghost story, a couple of years later after we come up, I'm given the opportunity to create a ghost story. And I'm
hmm
looking at one part of this novella thinking that would really work.
right,
Um, And so while in submitting it and working with the editors, one of the things I found out is that as I had written it, the piecemeal thing, none of those things actually work as a full story. I have to
okay,
do more work on it.
gotcha,
As a novella, it's probably fine. I'm still trying to. I still have to get feedback on the novella as a whole.
gotcha,
Um, so my idea is to write I sort of take another part of that play and kind of write a prequel to that's the way I've formatted the story that was eventually published,
okay,
um, which I have some of, but not. I'm not sure it's entirely finished.
okay,
Um, and then I do have a book out. I have two books out. One is a book of poetry and photographs. This is not really connected to what I just explained.
Okay.
Um, and I guess the book of poetry and photographs is connected. It is a sort of, I think of it as there is a story there,
Okay.
and it is possibly a ghost story, but it's very, very abstract. So basically, the book is a bunch of my poems set. It's laid out in a way where you can read the poems individually, or you could
Okay.
read them, or you could read them as a whole thing together, and the whole thing kind of tells an abstract kind of story, which I would
Okay.
say is sort of. But most people aren't reading it that way. Most people are reading the poems individually because
Okay.
facing the poems on the facing pages, the idea of the book was the photographs are the person I was working with happened to be a filmmaker. He was also willing to publish the book. Um, but we came up with this idea is what if the photographs were stills from a movie that was never made?
Interesting. Okay.
So so then we laid out the we laid out the photographs. So we did took the photographs that way, and then we laid out the photographs opposite the poems, where the photographs are not directly reflective, or not necessarily directly reflective of the content of the poems. Sometimes
Okay.
it's just that the feel of the photograph matches the feel of the poem.
Okay.
Um, and one of the things I discovered in creating a book like that is that most people who read poetry, including the the poet publishers I approached with this idea,
Hmm.
don't want don't want storytelling pictures next to poems.
Okay. Interesting.
They say it takes people away from the poem, so that basically thinking now they're not really reading the poem. Or um, I was hoping, or I was wondering if people would let the photo lead them in interpreting the poem. And it turns out that that was what happened. Most people didn't. There are a lot of people who really love the book because it is. They say it's a beautiful looking book, but
Okay.
but and some people, and there are a lot of people who really just read the poems and love the
Okay.
poetry. But
Okay.
the there was definitely some criticism about this, like the story idea I had in my head. So there are two stories going on: the film
Okay.
that was never made and the
Okay.
thing that was abstractly created.
Okay.
Um, so that but that but they're only tangentially connected. They're even not really directly connected. So
Okay.
it becomes a little bit of a mind game, I guess. And,
Okay.
people want to just read the poem. They just want to read the
Okay.
poem, I guess, the original.
Okay. So, do you have a goal to write a specific novel about things that are paranormal at this time? Are you going to stick to ghost
Uh,
stories, or what is your goal for the next series of information you're going to write
I
on?
guess I don't have a specific theme paranormal in mind, no. But I guess I stick to the like Lovecraft. I like sticking to the Lovecraftian end of things
Okay.
because I like the reason I'm such a fan is because I think Lovecraft, even even if his writing is really not up to today's standards of
Hmm.
political correctness, and you could say it can be offensive, etc., and
Sure.
that you shouldn't read it, that kind of thing. I'm not on. Um, I think his writing is an amazing study of fear.
Okay.
I think his writing really depicts how the human mind works when it's scared out of its mind.
Okay.
Um,
That's an interesting take on it. I don't disagree with that, because I do feel like in the line of Alfred Hitchcock, there's an awful lot of suspense in Lovecraft, and it seems like that's the main gist of it, is the buildup.
yeah,
Because your mind, especially when you're reading a book of that nature, your imagination kind of goes bonkers, and you start to imagine things you never would have thought of before. So
right,
it's almost like an appetizer to the story. You're getting fed all this information that sounds impossible, and yet possible at the same time. And so it's a
right,
real mind shaker. It's definitely
yeah.
stuff that's on the realm of supernatural, I think, because of the
And I
contents.
like the
Yeah.
I yeah, I also like the idea of the unreliable narrator.
Yes. That's
Like
awesome.
basically,
Yes.
um, you know, with the idea of the unreliable narrator possibly not being unreliable.
Right.
Like the whole idea of most Lovecraft stories is there's something out there that is so that if you actually knew about it, it would make you mad.
Yeah.
Um, and there is something to that idea of the human mind can't really grasp all of reality.
Right. True.
Um, so I like that kind of idea and the sort of
Sure.
vagueness and thing. So, if things happen to be paranormal in the story,
Hmm.
to me, that's sort of a side thing.
Sure.
That particular ghost story happened to be a ghost story because I was approached and asked if I wanted to submit to this anthology, which was going to be
Gotcha.
all ghost stories.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so I was like, well, I'd like to submit this particular thing I have written,
Right.
but you want a ghost story. So now I have to make this thing
Right.
a ghost story.
Gotcha.
Um,
So how,
so
if
yeah,
someone wanted to read these, how would they get these series of
so
ghost
that
stories?
if they wanted to get that series of ghost stories, it's in a book called Even in the Grave, which is on Amazon. And
Okay.
the editors of the book are Carol Geisander and James Chambers.
Okay.
And um,
But that's okay. But they can
if
get that
you,
on Amazon.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, if you wanted to, I could go off camera and find the book and then show it, but
That's okay.
probably, yeah. So that's where those ghost stories are.
Okay.
My poetry book, you unfortunately have to get from me because
Okay.
the publisher doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
Um, um, it Yeah, and you can either contact me through Facebook or which you on Facebook. I am my name, which your listeners probably can't see, but it's the name you see on my. It's which is Oliver Baer. Um, that's me on Facebook. I don't go by another name.
Okay. And just for our listeners,
Um,
it's Oliver, Oliver, and his last name Baer, Baer is the last name.
yes. Or as I like to say, if you're fans out there are fans of theater, think of the Broadway show or the Charles Dickens
Okay.
novel,
Okay.
Oliver Twist.
Okay.
Bear is the German word for the big furry animal with the claws.
Right.
So it's Oliver, big furry animal with claws.
That's good. I like that.
Big furry animal with claws in German, I should say.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So
Yeah,
what about, okay, so you've dabbled, you do the pagan thing, you've dabbled
right.
into mysticism, and a little bit of writing about ghosts. What's in store for you next? What is your goal? What are you going to work on next? Or what fascinates
Well,
you about this stuff?
so I guess next, I guess I don't have a clear goal,
Okay.
which sometimes I find with this stuff, all the stuff that I feel like I've experienced or done,
Hmm.
and from my view, hasn't actually been planned. I would
Okay.
say the ritual stuff that I've done with my teacher, he has planned that and has said, we are doing this. So then I get myself ready to do that.
Okay.
Um, but the other stuff, I feel like the best thing about it is it hasn't been planned. Or you could say, like, on some level, perhaps I would go with, you know, the whole thing of like the universe will let me know.
Okay.
Um, and even in my writing, I tend to be, I tend to not plan out my stories.
Okay.
Um, I tend to basically start writing and see where it goes, which is why I sometimes have to do like with the ghost story. I already had something, but I was like, now I have to make this a ghost story.
Right.
So that was a plan, but it wasn't. And there were versions of that where while I was trying to make it a ghost story, it wasn't really becoming that. So I had to then force myself to
Right.
put it in that mold, which is not something that all I like. That's why the editors for that book that I mentioned were extremely helpful to me, is because
Okay.
without their help, I feel like the story wasn't working for them because I was
Okay.
going somewhere else.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I do have a plan to write, as I said, sort of prequel to that ghost story and even in the
Okay.
grave.
Okay.
Um, it's National Poetry Month, so this is not really paranormal oriented,
Okay.
but I am doing Facebook Live readings of my
Okay.
poetry for every night for National Poetry Month.
Nice.
Some of those poems are do have elements of paranormal in them because I could not stop myself.
Okay.
Um,
That's
um,
understandable. Okay.
yeah, that's why I say I write dark poetry. Even like I'm in an open mic scene and a poetry scene here in the East Village of New York City, and a lot of those people, I started saying I write dark poetry because a lot of those people were coming up to me like, I like your poetry, but it's really dark. And I would say,
So you warn them
like,
now?
well, I would say, really? Because I didn't think that one was that dark. And they were like, oh no, that was kind of dark. Like
Okay.
most of it, I think of my poetry as like romantic or not necessarily happy. I think their thing was like, it's not necessarily a happy feeling all the time. I
Right.
don't really write happy stuff.
Right.
Sometimes it's more hopeful than I think it should be, but
Right.
um, so I say I do that. And then some of it is sexy because
Right.
for some time, for 10 years, I did a magazine inspired by H.P. Lovecraft that involved the thing that H.P. Lovecraft would never write,
Okay.
which is sex.
Gotcha.
So we did a magazine. We did the first magazine, as far as we know, that was marketed as erotic horror. There are plenty of them
Interesting.
now, but we did it. We did it from '98 to 2008, and most people were not marketing anything as erotic horror. And then you add H.P. Lovecraft, and people really got weirded out. Um,
Sure. So what was
and
this
and
magazine
and
called?
and upset, and they were upset too.
Sorry to
It
interrupt
was
you.
called. That's fine. It's called Cthulhu Sex, or it was called Cthulhu Sex. That
Interesting.
was the other problem with the magazine we had, is that most people couldn't pronounce Cthulhu, and we had it written out. So they were like,
Okay.
so basically, so all they saw was sex. So
Right.
one of the biggest problems we had was most people, even though we were really more on the literary end and the erotica
Right.
end, we did have artwork. We had poetry, prose, and artwork.
Okay.
Um, so we were essentially a literary magazine with artwork. And my friend who's the magazine was his brainchild and really had a very clear idea of what he wanted the magazine to be, was adamant about the fact that we were erotica and not porn.
Okay.
He said if I wanted to do porn, that would be too easy, and that's not interesting to me.
Okay.
So I'm more interested in erotica than I am. And so that's what we did. So, I started writing, trying to gear my poetry more towards the magazine. Um, After the magazine, so my other book, after the magazine, we stopped doing the magazine some years later. I had this idea, even when we were doing the magazine, of trying to create a story out of the letters to the editor, the forewords and afterwards of the magazine,
Okay.
because I was writing most of the letters to the editor.
Gotcha.
And we weren't really, back then, we weren't, it was before social media, so we weren't
Okay.
getting much response. We had a
All right.
forum, but we weren't getting much feedback about the magazine.
Okay.
So, on some level, I just decided to start writing the letter to the editor as if it was a story.
So just a
Prompted
thought.
by prompted
That
by
sounds
a
interesting.
moment.
So what about reviving the magazine and putting it online?
I thought of that, but doing the magazine was a lot of work.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
And
sure.
I think I am, between the freelance editing, copy editing, and proofreading, and doing my own stuff. Um, I feel like there's there's a lot going on. That's a lot to me.
Okay.
So um, so basically, I guess I don't. I think the magazine is like, it turns out I think it works in its own Lovecraft. It works and is perfectly, wonderfully Lovecraftian in the fact that it's still that now it's hard to get issues of the magazine unless you contact me. It's possible there are some floating around the internet, but I don't know if that's a. I think it's very hard to find that.
Okay.
So like I did, as I said, so I did end up creating a book. I did end up continuing the legacy by
Hmm.
creating a epistolary novel. So I did actually write that story by putting all the letters to the editor, forwards and afterwards together. I did actually write that.
Okay.
So it isn't a book you can get on Amazon, put out by Crossroad Press, called, with the, you could say, eponymous name, Letters to the Editor of Cthulhu Sex Magazine.
Okay. Gotcha.
Uh,
All right.
so it's now a book, um, which, yeah, if people want to buy it, that would be wonderful, and the publisher would be really pleased, because apparently I don't sell a lot of them.
Oh,
Um,
all right.
so, so but again, I probably am not great at promoting it, as well as promoting it as well as I should be.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, yeah. So there's something else that also creatively that um, more came out of the poetry book than, which is I have an ongoing collaborative project,
Okay. What's that
which
about?
which basically that's about me. One of the things that brought into focus with my book, with the poetry book, was was that I am actually really interested in how other people interpret my work rather than me telling people what my work is about.
Okay.
And so that inspired this collaborative project where I ask other artists to interpret my work in any way they would like. It has mostly been focused on poetry
Mm-hmm.
and mostly has been done by singer songwriters, musicians, composers, music oriented people. And it has resulted in a CD. So there is a CD called A Conclave of Baer,
Okay.
um, which was the name of the CD is actually called Gathering Souls. The group that put the CD together is called A Conclave of Baer, but really, um, that was just me trying to create a name for the fact that it's not just one group of people. The CD
Okay.
is a number of different people
Okay.
interpreting my poems
Okay.
um,
And how
in
would
their own
someone find
music.
that?
That's on Bandcamp. It's on
Okay.
a conclave of bear.bandcamp.com.
Okay.
Um, you can. There is a main portal that sort of has a lot of this information, which is my
Okay.
website.
Okay.
My website is tentacularity.wordpress.com.
Okay.
And there is a store on my website which has a lot of this stuff that
Okay.
I've talked about. Um, so yeah, and that collaborative project keeps going. Um, I ended so the CD release party went so well. I ended up doing a poetry sets and music show for several
Nice.
years here in the East Village until the venue closed. Um, and then there are on the website, the main page of the website, there are various examples of what other people have done with my work.
Mm-hmm.
So it continues, and I'm currently in talks with other people,
Good.
um, creating versions of my work. Um, but I'm very open with it. So basically,
Good.
part of the thing that apparently has become a problem for some people is that I put no parameters on it. I basically say whatever you want to do works for me since I'm much more interested in your interpretation than I am in telling you. And apparently,
Okay.
some musical people don't like that. They want parameters.
So when you
So
say parameters, do you mean like a copyright or do you mean like what
no,
direction the
they want
usage is?
they want a direction. They
Gotcha.
are like there's at least a couple people on the CD who I had these long discussions with, where
Mm-hmm.
they kept insisting they didn't want to reinterpret my work because I basically say you could do anything to the poem you want. I don't think
Okay.
my poems are very lyrical. So it's
Okay.
like if you need to change it to fit in the song structure, go right ahead. If you need
Okay.
to change if you need to change the words, as long as the gist of the poem is there, you can
Right.
change the words. I
Okay.
usually number my poems. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
want to use the number, that's fine. So like a lot of that, some people are not comfortable with that. They're like,
Okay.
well, could you tell me what you like? What is your idea about the music that you want? I'm like, I don't really have an idea. Like to me, that's part of the interpretive process, and I'm interested in like what music you would create.
Okay.
for the poem you pick. And
Okay.
some people are not even interested in picking poems. Like in the beginning, I think for the CD, I picked the particular poems people were going to set to music.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Okay.
and then as time went on, I asked people to pick their own and found out that a lot of people were really uncomfortable with picking their own.
Really?
They wanted me to pick.
Gotcha.
Um, so it just became very interesting to me. So again, it's another sort of like experiment, or it's become very interesting to me to see like how like how as artists we can put restrictions on ourselves. Like
Okay.
if somebody says, you know, here you have carte blanche to do whatever you want. You know, there are a number of people who don't like that.
Okay.
And that's been interesting to me.
Okay.
I prefer to give them carte blanche because I find that again it's becomes interest that the end product is more interesting to me because things come up about like, oh, I would have never thought of the poem in that way.
Right. Right. So, with all the stuff that you've done between the magazine and the books, what are you most proud of at this point?
Um, I think I'm most proud of. I guess it's hard for me to rank things. Um, I because I think I'm proud in general that I have products.
Okay.
Um, you know, I don't think I ever thought that I would have products. But like whenever I get down on myself, which a lot of artists do, you know, I then look like um, you know, one of the things that always surprises me is when I'm continually submitting stuff to anthologies, collections, and they always ask for a bio. And when I send my bio, I always look at the bio and went, "Wow, I actually did a lot of different things."
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Because there are other things that I haven't mentioned that I have done.
Sure.
Um, but so like I keep looking at that bio and like, wow, you know, I keep thinking I didn't haven't done anything.
Right.
And then I look at the bio and I'm like, well, you're wrong.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a big step to release anything that you've written or drawn or any type of, because it's all artwork to me, whether it's the
Right.
written word or a picture. And speaking from my own experience, it's not easy to put it out there, as they say,
Mm,
to take whatever you created, whatever your baby is, you know, in your book of words or pages,
mm,
or your piece of art or your pottery, whatever it is that you've made with your own brain and your hands, and
mm,
actually let the public cross-examine it and either love it or hate it or whatever they're going to do with it.
mm.
That's a big step to put yourself out there in that way.
Yeah.
To me, that's harder than going on a blind date, because
Oh, really? Okay.
you're really, yes, because you're really showing your inner self. There's no
Mm,
hiding. Whatever you've produced, you're putting your soul and your heart into that and your mind. And that's very open. That's a
mm,
very direct line into who you are. And so being bold like that to me is amazing. I think it's great to take those steps and actually put yourself out there. So I commend you for so many different efforts of putting yourself out there and doing writing, because that's not something everybody can do. Not everybody has the courage to do that. It takes a
right.
lot of courage to do what you do.
Thank you. Thank you for that. What I was gonna ask you was, do you think, because this is my idea, is that it's fine, and I know a number of people like this, I'm sure you do too. It's fine to create something and actually put your words or your pottery or something like that. But it is, as you said, a whole next level to putting it out there, because I know a bunch of people who do create things and are very talented, but their
Hmm.
work stays in their apartment
Correct.
or their studio, or so it doesn't get out there. And I try to encourage them to get it out there, but it is a completely next level
Right.
to doing that. And I sometimes do forget that, because it has become, because to me, I guess I see it now as part of what I have to do,
Hmm.
including, like, I also, the other thing I do, as I mentioned, is I go to a lot of open mics.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm with the the live people,
Right.
or as the big orange monster. I would guess you're a fan of Bugs Bunny. Do you remember the big orange monster?
Yes. Yes.
As sometimes in my mind, it's like, people, ah! Um,
Right.
so you go among the people and
Right.
you know, you find out that it's also inspiring. Sometimes it's more inspiring to be among people
Yes.
who are who may not be exactly creating the same thing you are, but are
Right.
also creators, than it
Okay.
is to, like, sit in your studio or your house and try to create on your own. Like, it's fine to have goals and a number of projects that you want to do,
Right.
but I feel like you get a whole new perspective and sometimes inspiration going out among the people.
Right. So, what was your question in there? You said there was a
So,
question.
so I guess my question is, do you also see it? Do you also see different levels to being a creative? I guess is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I actually have lots of hobbies. And so I paint, I draw, I write, and I'm also a psychic
Mm,
medium. And so any of those things out in the public has never been easy for me. And I
mm.
literally just publicly admitted that I'm a psychic a couple of years ago.
Oh wow.
I've been
Okay.
doing readings for people for over 50 years
Mm,
privately,
mm,
and quite by happenstance. Either a friend of a friend that knows I'm a psychic refers someone to me, or I meet someone randomly and it
mm,
just clicks and it's the right time and place. Otherwise, I kept to myself. I didn't say a word to people,
mm,
not even my family. And so um, that to me is a whole different part of the brain to be able to
mm,
access that and do that. And speaking from just a straight creativity level, um, I combine the psychic in with it because even though it's not creative, it's still
mm,
extending myself out to the public.
mm.
And so in doing so, even though I was afraid of backlash because of some of the reactions I've had over the years have not been
Right.
very favorable, they've been rather unkind and cruel
Mm,
at times. Um, but just like giving someone a painting I've made, it's still
mm,
terrifying to put yourself out there no matter what you're doing and no matter what you're sharing of yourself.
mm,
But I have also found in that same breath, I have to say, it's also been an enormous blessing because when I've extended myself and put myself out there with whatever my gift is, creative or psychic or whatever, I love the feedback. I love it when
mm,
somebody can tell me, I like what you did there, but I would have liked if you would have added this, or I would have,
mm,
all of that feels
mm,
reciprocal. It feels like they're sharing in what I did. It's
mm,
not just a comment. They're actually getting a participation in what I'm trying to do. And so that is gold to me
mm,
because that to me is just as intimate as sharing Christmas with someone or a
mm.
birthday. I mean, those are very special moments in your private life that connect you to who you are. And when you
Right.
can talk with someone about something that you've created or that you work on in a personal level like that, and they can actually critique you, however they go about doing that,
Mm,
they're engaged.
mm.
People don't disagree unless they give a crap.
Right.
I
Right.
have
Exactly.
noticed. If
Yes.
if you don't care, yeah, sure, it's fine, whatever. why do you care? What, you wouldn't bother saying anything. But when someone actually takes the time to say, um, I like it because, or
Mm,
I don't like this part because, all of that to
mm,
me is an investment. That's a reciprocal communication with whatever you put out in the public. And that's bravery. That's not easy to do. That's scary, especially after COVID. People have become incredibly public shy, more than I
mm.
ever imagined. I even found that in myself,
Yeah.
getting more shied away from doing things. And recently, my husband is a musician, and a very
Mm,
dear friend of ours came out and took some photographs at one of his performances, and I
mm,
was ecstatic. And I almost wanted to stand up and go, "Yay, she's here!" Because
mm,
this woman was very candid over COVID and shared publicly
mm.
how much she was afraid to go out.
Yeah.
And that
Mm,
not because of COVID, but because of what happened as a result of COVID,
mm,
that
mm,
she became very complacent about being in the public and didn't
mm,
realize how uncomfortable she can be in the public. And
mm,
so it took a lot of courage for her to go back out and just
mm,
be around people. I think we got a little spoiled having our groceries delivered and our whatnots
mm,
delivered and getting to make our nest, you know,
mm,
spring and summer and whatever,
mm.
sick or not. And that uniting of your life was very different. We haven't had that.
Right, right.
It
Mm,
it's always out, go, out, go, out, go, out, go. And when you get to sit down and watch TV, you're about ready to pass out because you're so tired.
mm.
But getting to just nest in your house and just plan your meals,
Right,
sleep,
right.
just connect. I mean, that kind of
Mm,
intimacy has been missing for years
right. Mm,
from our lives. So I think it was very good for us in some ways, and I think it was also bad in some ways too.
right.
So any reaching out of personalities, I think, is vital. I think we all need
Mm,
to share share a
yeah,
part of ourselves and be brave and stick our toes in the water again and just get out there. So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
glad you're doing the live poetry thing, because we need that stuff. We need our arts. We
Yeah,
need it.
right,
We need to hear expressions of creativity, even if we don't like it. It doesn't matter. It's still
right,
something to click your brain open and say, "What about this? What do you think?"
right, right. Yeah, that your comments there just brought up another um question I have for you. Um as particularly since you're a psychic, is through my studies and my practice with my instructor, I've become more energy sensitive than I think I was
Sure.
previously. I actually believe that I probably was energy sensitive before I met him,
Okay.
but that I think I think I was fantasizing a lot. In other words, I think I was creating things that weren't there, or maybe I was just misinterpreting
Okay.
what I was feeling. So one of the things with COVID, I also am having a hard, like, the big thing about me getting out and doing live events is also a big deal because I realize I have a bunch of what I refer to as COVID anxiety because I'm an immunocompromised person.
Okay.
So,
True.
um, so basically, this has been a very scary time for me. Um, but I've been working on the anxiety by going out and doing these things, which I wasn't doing last year. So this time last year, I think I was too afraid to do indoor events, except in the so in the summer I would attempt to do it if the doors and windows were open. But
Right.
so I'm moving forward is a good thing. But one of the things that came to me energetically during COVID was I realized how much I actually missed the energy of people. And that one of the things about much of my family is they like being um, in areas of less people.
Okay.
Um, I live in the city. Most of my family are not city people.
Okay.
Um, so so to them, it wasn't. I realized it wasn't as big a deal.
Right.
Um, but it was really like it turns out it was really messing with my head.
Sure.
The
Sure.
fact that I couldn't go out and be among people, and I
Right.
didn't, and I never thought that that influenced me so much.
Right.
But it turns out it really did.
Yeah.
Um, like I was depressed, etc. You know, um, my anxiety, of course, was not helped.
Sure.
Um, but so like part of I think so like the getting out there has felt better. It's still kind of nerve wracking, but it feels better than I did. And I guess my question again, long winded way of getting to the question,
That's okay.
um,
That's all right.
is do you feel like you've also felt an energy shift?
Since COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, positively. Um, just I'll say two things to cover in response to what you're saying. Number one, um, I totally understand the immunocompromised thing. My husband also has one kidney. He lost his other kidneys, had a
Ah,
transplant 13 years ago. And so for our
okay.
listeners and viewers, let me just nutshell this. So when someone says they're immunocompromised, that can be a lot of different things. It can be maybe they have sensitive sinuses, maybe they have asthma and smoke is difficult, or whatever it is, they have arthritis. There's several different things that the body can be dampered from. But when someone is a recipient of another organ, a body organ, any organ, they have to take these what's called an immune suppressant drug, and the only reason they do that is so they can keep their new body part. The body does not like anything it didn't come with. And so, regardless of how perfect a match is for an organ, you have to take these medications that literally turn off your immunities. And what that means is normally you would go outside and you'll run by maybe 10 people that have a cold, flu, or whatever, and you don't catch any of it because your immune system blocks it and gets rid of it. Someone like Oliver or my husband, that's all turned off. And what's worse about it is their bodies are so disconnected from the immune response, a proper immune response, that they can be exposed to any number of things and not even know that they are fighting it because their body is so low on the fight response for germs that they can be sick for months and not realize it. My husband almost died in the beginning of September because he actually had a problem with his appendix. He had gotten an infection in it,
Mm.
had no idea, and he had it such a long time. It was bubbling and brewing for a long time. It actually became gangrene.
Oh, wow.
And so when it ruptured, it almost killed him because it
Hmm.
wasn't just the normal
Right.
toxins of an appendix that
Hmm.
appendix filters poisons out of our body.
Hmm.
It was rotten and almost killed him.
Hmm.
Um, so because of COVID and the fear of not just COVID, but colds, anything,
Hmm.
um, there's situations in public environments that we would love to be a part of, but it's not wise. We have to be so careful. Um, and respectful of others' freedoms and not wanting to damper anybody's fun. But we have to say no to a lot of things sometimes because it's just not safe. And secondly, in dealing with going back into the public, absolutely, I feel an energy shift. And I think it's a number of things. I think one of them is at this point in time, at this month, we're in April of 2024, things are starting to go back to normal. The music scene, for example, in restaurants and bars is starting to open back up, just like it was before COVID, before 2019 even. And so that's wonderful because people are going outside, they're dancing, they're doing these physical activities, they're becoming more involved, people are talking more. I noticed that during COVID, people were very reclusive, even in line at the grocery store or at a gas station. I mean, normally in the part of the country that I live in Washington and in Oregon, people are very, very friendly. And they normally will say, hey, how's your day? Or good morning or something. There's usually a conversation, there's a connection. And COVID kind of took that away. People stopped saying hello, greeting kind of went out the door. And I'm noticing that recently it's coming back. That social interaction is building, and there is a jolliness. It's the only word I can think of to describe it. There's a jolly energy when people are getting together that I'm feeling. And I love that. I love that. Just to try and exchange. It takes a village to raise a kid, supposedly, is a famous phrase, but I think it takes a village to be a village. I think people forget how much we need each other. None of this works if we don't all do something. If we don't have someone to take garbage, someone to make sure we have water, someone to make sure we have toilet paper, or someone to make sure that we have Brussels sprouts when we want them, or Pepsi or coffee, and someone to make sure we have heat that can get to our houses and electricity to play on our computers. We all have a job, and we are reliant upon everyone else to do whatever it is they do. When we forget that, we lose our humanity. And I think getting forced to stay away from each other kind of open that up a little bit to where we're looking at each other again. We're talking more. And yes, I definitely feel it. I feel it. And I think I'm more aware of it because not having any contact for months on end was very sad. You know, I missed my people. I missed my friends. I missed my family. And just, I miss that joyfulness. I mean, people are full of energy. We make electricity in our heads and our hearts. We're full of electricity. And when you get bummed, that energy level goes down and you become tired in your thoughts and your mind. And when you have other people to interact with, it kind of brightens your day. It wakes you up. Science has proven that we do better in groups. We do better when we have activities together, whether it's a sport or church or going to watch a band or whatever it is. That interaction outside of work's good too. But things outside of work really build our social network, and it builds our souls, and our spirits are brighter and more vibrant when we have each other interacting. We do better. So yeah, I think it's much better. I still think it's changed. I feel like it's definitely different than it was before COVID, but I don't think it's worse. I think it's better. I think that we're doing better than we have in a very long time because we have a better perspective. I think that we learned something from COVID that maybe we didn't realize we needed to learn about appreciating each other a little more. That's my take anyway.
Nice. And I'm glad to hear that your husband is doing okay. As you know, well, as I might have said at the beginning of this show, towards the beginning, you can tell him you had on your show, a person with a kidney transplant who's had it.
He will be ecstatic, Oliver. I will have to introduce you sometime. He would love to talk to you, I bet.
Tell him there is hope.
Yeah.
And I am glad that he got through that appendix thing, because I understand how scary that is.
Yeah.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, and the appendix was right above the new kidney. So when it exploded, it got to the kidney, and it became toxic as well. So we were pretty scared. I mean, he missed most of it. I was awake and coherent, but he was kind of out of it for almost a month and barely making it. So I'm very grateful that he survived it, because
I am too. I'm grateful.
I had no idea that his body could keep an infection that long.
I know, that's surprising to me too.
I'm amazed. I'm shocked that, number one, that it didn't kill him, and I'm shocked it didn't get to his other organs. But yeah, I didn't. So without immunity, and it completely made sense the way the surgeon explained it to me. He goes, think of it this way: you cut your finger, and there's germs from wherever you were when you got that cut that are sitting in your finger. Your skin heals up, but those toxins or those other germs are still floating around your body, and you have no way to fight it off. Your body can't resist whatever those are, it's just going to multiply and spread throughout your entire body until you
Yeah.
get some kind of help. And so
Exactly.
he doesn't feel sick. He didn't feel bad until right before it happened.
Yeah,
And
and
he,
that's
yeah,
one of the, you could say that's one of the, like, you could say that he and I are both examples of the marvel of of human existence, of the human body, because by the current scientific knowledge, as I said at the beginning of this show, by the current scientific models, both of us should not be here.
right.
Both of us
Agreed.
should not be talking.
That's right. That's right.
And it's one of those things that I was trying to tell people the height of um, during the height of the horror of COVID, which was like science doesn't know everything,
Right.
and in a way, I said you all are basically living what I have lived my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
like, why aren't there answers? They're not telling us stuff. They know things and they're not telling us stuff. I was like, they may, but they may also not actually know.
Right.
But they have to tell you an answer.
Right.
So, like I think, like, yeah, it was a very interesting. It's also been a very eye-opening
Agreed.
experience because you learn things about some people that you thought were like you thought that some people understood more
Right.
about science, and it just proves that, like, when people's lives are on the line, what I used to call it, the social work job, emotional thinking
Yeah.
is completely what people do
Yeah.
when they're scared, or
Yep.
there's no intellectualism. It doesn't matter how much you know.
Right.
You're basically like, these people are wrong, or like what's happening in the country today. The divisiveness is a lot of emotional thinking.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Definitely. Well, I have to say thank you so much, Oliver, for coming on and letting me interview you today. And you've shared some really interesting things. And just one more time, would you give us your access? So how
Oh
can
yeah,
someone write to you or contact you with your .com? Can you say those again? And please
yep.
spell it for our listeners so they can keep up with you.
Okay, so my website, which is where you can see my content, is Tentacularity, which is TENTACULARITY .wordpress, which is WORDPRESS.com, COM. That's where a lot of my content is. You can contact me through Facebook. Look for my name, which is Oliver, which is OLIVER, Oliver, if you, and then Baer, which is BAER, which, as I was saying earlier, is the German word for the big furry animal with the claws.
Or baby in Gaelic.
There you go. Thank you. Oh, I love that. I didn't know that, and I'm a
Yes.
language person, so I love stuff like that.
Yep.
And I guess if so those are the two main. I am on Twitter under Baer. It's OBAER.
Okay.
And my email, which is is Father, FATHER, Baer, BAER, at yahoo.com. And then being the language, you'll like this, Holly. Took me 25 years or more, being the language person, I was kind of upset at myself to realize that's not just Father O Baer. That's also Fat Hero Baer. You look at it.
That's awesome.
Besides,
that is awesome. I love it.
The only reason I got that was one of the other jobs I had was I worked with the Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art here in the city, in New York City,
cool.
for 3 years or so. And somebody there pointed out that it said Fat Hero Baer.
That's perfect.
And I was like, what? What do you mean?
Right.
And I looked at it and I was like, I can't believe I didn't see that.
Right. Sometimes it's right in front of your nose.
Exactly. So, but yeah, mostly it's probably easier on some level to go through Facebook. I don't know if there's really a direct contact way through the website, but
well, the email's good, and if people can find you on Facebook or Twitter, they can message you there, so that's good.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on today. This is Holly from Holly's Bandorium saying thank you for listening or following. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you want more similar content. And thank you again, Oliver, for joining me today to share your information. I hope everyone has a great day.
For having me.
All right. Thanks.